Alright, so we're going to start where we left off. You should have just finished most of the slide presentation, which was the introduction to lesson 2, and I've asked you to watch this video of building a bar graph from frequency distribution. So the first thing I'm going to do is head back to the frequency distribution. You notice I've skipped past the relative frequency distribution because we want to look at the frequency distribution, which should have the counts of the number of individuals in each category for this categorical or qualitative data variable. So we're going to go ahead and start to draw, pick out our whiteboard here, and start to draw the graph. So I'm going to start by describing what the data set is, and I'll put a title at the top of the graph. The graph here is of a data set which has the 2010 Red Sox, and it tells us what position they played was their primary position. If a guy played several positions, we're just going to go with whichever one he played most to simplify things. So 2010 Red Sox by position is a good description of our data set. We're going to need a couple of axes. We've got a vertical axis goes up and down, and the horizontal axis goes left to right, which is parallel to the horizon, so we call it horizontal. And then we're going to want to label each of the two axes. We're going to want to label down here for the horizontal axis and label up here for the vertical axis. Which way do we go? Well, we always want to put the data variable that we're graphing along the horizontal axis, along the x-axis. That is always going to be the case whether we're doing qualitative data, quantitative data, whatever we're doing. We're always going to want to put the data variable we're plotting along the horizontal axis, and along the vertical axis we're always going to have the number or the count of individuals. And it's nice if you can make some effort to describe who your individuals are. So in this case we have players are individuals, the players for the Red Sox, and so it's players in what position they played. And so the individuals are players, the data variable that we're plotting is the position that they played. And so we're going to go ahead and label all of the positions that are in our frequency distribution. And if you don't remember, you can go back and refer. I just stuck with the standard ordering that goes with how you score a baseball game. So we start with catcher and we end with right field. And so I've got all 9 categories for this data variable from catcher through right field listed along the axis. You want to make sure that you have room for each of the categories in your categorical data variable. And then you want to go back to your data set and take a look before you try to decide what your scale is going to be on your vertical axis. The values that I'm going to need to plot, the heights of the bars are going to match up with these counts, with these numbers of individuals. So my smallest one is a 1 and my biggest one is a 23. And so we're going to want to make sure that our scale will allow us to do from 1 to 23 fairly easily. So unless you have good reason to do otherwise, you should always put 0 at the bottom. Now, what do you put at the top? Well, you don't want a huge amount of white space, and so we've got a total of what, 53 individuals, and so it might make sense to some people to put a 53 up top, up here, or something close to 53, 55, or something like that. That's going to be a poor choice because the biggest category we have is a 23, and so the top half of the scale will never be used because none of the categories, individual categories, are that size. So you just want to pick a value for the top here that is very close to your biggest category. So for example, in this case, we've got 23 as our biggest category. I want something just a little bit bigger than 23 or equal to 23, but I want something that's easy to break into equal parts because the rest of the scale has to get broken up in a way that we can tell exactly how high the rest of the stuff is. So 25 is a lot easier to break into parts than a 23, so I'm going to put 25, and then I'm going to break the rest of this scale into 5 equal parts. This 25 breaks down by 5s very easily. 5, 10, 15, and 20. And then I have 25 up top. Now, if you're doing this on graph paper, one of the things that's very important is to make sure that the number of squares here is exactly the same as the number of squares here, is the same as the number of squares here, and so on. That equal parts in terms of numbers should be equal distances on the scale. And they don't have to be perfect, like my 10 to 15 here is just a hair shy of what my 0 to 5 here doesn't have to be perfect, especially if you're drawing it by hand. Try to make sure that you make some attempt to make those close, particularly if you're using graph paper. So now we just go ahead and plot the bars. We got 6 as the height of the bar for the number of catchers we had. We had 6 catchers. We had 23 pitchers. Oh, that's not a good line. Okay, that's a little better. 23 pitchers. How many first basemen did we have? We had 6 first basemen, and then so on. You can go ahead and draw bars that are the appropriate height for each of these categories. Now I've got all these bars, and you want to make sure that if you've got 6 catchers and 6 center fielders, that these bars are the same height. If you've got 2 left fielders and 3 center fielders, you want to make sure that this is really a third of that height. You've got 3 shortstops, so that should be half the height of the center fielder. These are 4, and this is 2, so the second baseman should be double the left fielders. And then you just make sure the scale is appropriate, that these are scaled in a way that's appropriate for the number of individuals in each category. Another thing that's important that I'm going to be looking for is to try to make sure that the bars have about the same width. And again, I don't expect you to be a computer or anything that you're drawing freehand and mistakes happen. This pitcher bar is a little narrower than the first base bar, but it's not hugely different, so I'm not going to mark that off. But I do want you to make some attempt to make sure that those are the same. Now when I grade a graph, I'm going to be looking for a total of 6 things. The first thing I'm going to be looking for is the title of your graph. You have to have a title which describes your entire data set. And so if we flip to the last slide in the slideshow, I point all this out as well. The title should describe your data set. Your label on your x-axis or your horizontal axis should be always your data variable. Your data variable always goes along your horizontal axis. Number 3, I'm going to be looking for either the percent or the number of individuals, and whether it's which it is depends on whether you have frequency distribution or relative frequency distribution. Here I started with a frequency distribution, so I have a number of players. The 4th thing I'm going to be looking for, I'm sorry, it should be over here, is your scale on your vertical axis. The scale on your vertical axis should be evenly spaced. You should demarcate where what the values of any of your markings are. It should be clear, be able to tell that. It should be appropriately sized so that the top value is close to the largest of your categories, and there shouldn't be a huge amount of white space at the top above your highest bar. 5th, I'm going to be looking for your category labels along the horizontal axis. So we've got there's 9 different categories that are associated with this categorical data variable, from catcher up through right field. Those categories need to be labeled. And 6th, I'm going to be looking for your bars in the main body of your graph, and these need to have appropriate heights that match the values in the frequency distribution, and they need to have approximately the same width as each other. And those are the 6 things I'm going to be highlighting